You're listening to the Accordion to Me podcast with Veronique Medrano. Hi, I'm Veronique in an undisclosed location in the Hollywood Hills.
What is going on?
Well, this week's episode, we get to chat with Multi-Grammy Award-winning producer and activist Wil-Dog Abers. As a bassist and founder of LA-based band Ozomatli and member of Los Super 7, Wil-Dog has a prolific career in music and the arts, as well as having music featured in iconic film, TV, and games like Never Been Kissed, Sex and the City, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and recently, Flamin' Hot. Today, we get to talk with Wil-Dog Abers in this undisclosed location about his life and the arts. This podcast is sponsored by Cricket Wireless. I recently made the switch to Cricket, and they removed the extra hassle of staying connected and calling within the US and Mexico. And trust me, that is always an issue with every other service provider except for Cricket. Make the switch and join the Cricket Comunidad with me, Veronique. And if you think that's too good to be true, then download the Try Cricket app from the App Store to start your free trial of nationwide 5G that covers 99% of folks in the US. It's just one reason why people who come to Cricket stay with Cricket.
One trial per person, 5 people per home address. An unlocked GSM-compatible smartphone is required. Cricket 5G requires a compatible device and is not available everywhere. For 5G coverage, see cricketwireless.com/map for more details.
Hi, Will.
Hello, Veronique. That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you for putting that together. That was
Hey,
really
well,
nice.
I will say, working on that introduction, we were talking about it.
Yeah.
Because I was researching and I was telling you I was researching, and you immediately told me, hey, some of the stuff out there is not completely correct. And I stumbled upon the aforementioned possibly not correct thing, which is a Wikipedia page.
Yes.
And so the first thing I want to do is let us go over, for the first time in a long time, from what I'm to understand,
Okay.
your Wikipedia page, and we will have a new segment called True or False.
True or false? Good.
True or false.
Okay. Nice. Love
so,
that.
true or false from the Wikipedia files.
All right.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes.
So, Wil-Dog Abers is bassist primarily for LA-based Ozomatli band. True
Correct.
or false?
Correct. True.
Okay.
True.
Wil-Dog also sometimes is called Breakdance Willie.
Well, not sometimes, but that was my first alter ego.
Really?
Yeah, when I was 9 years old. Yep.
9. How did
So
they
we're talking 1982.
Oh
so
my
I'm giving
God.
how old I am. Yeah.
So they really pulled from like the secret files. The
Yeah,
X-Files.
and I'm not sure where they got that from, but yeah, that was it.
Wil-Dog is of Jewish descent.
Yeah, I'm half Jewish on
Okay.
father's side, so waist down.
Okay. That's interesting. Wil-Dog is a Pisces. I want you to know that this is actually what it says on his. There's little sections.
No shit, it's just like
like a sentence.
okay.
Wil-Dog is a Pisces.
Yes, I am a Pisces.
How does it feel to be a Pisces in this world?
As different from other, or what, or just I don't know. I love when I was born. I don't know, water sign. I love water, of course. Yeah, I don't know a lot about astrology.
Do you subscribe to astrology?
No, not at all. But I'm sure that, I mean, there's things I've read like other signs, and there's things in those that I have as well. So, but then they all say, oh, but they're all connected. Of course they are, because we're all connected. So, you know what I mean? You could kind of like, but I know that there's people that are like, oh, you're with this sign because this, and I guess I'm like Aquarius rising. I don't know what that means, or
so what that means
what
is
does that
mean? This is where it gets ridiculously specific in
Okay,
astrology.
yeah, okay.
Because I think you and I can understand that back 80s, 90s, if you said, oh, I'm this,
Right.
that's it. Like
Right.
that is all,
Yeah.
and you're chill.
Okay.
Now there is natal astrological charts
Okay.
where people go, oh, I'm a rising this. And it
Okay.
all comes from the time and place and the day
And
that
the
you were
day.
born.
Okay.
And they point out what like areas of like houses,
Right.
like literally the sky. So
Yeah.
where was Aquarius? Well, it's your sun, your rising is your sun sign,
Okay.
practically.
Yeah.
So that means that was like directly on top of you,
Right.
like in the sky when you were
Yeah.
being born.
I mean, I just think
That's
humans.
insane.
Yeah, I get it, but I just think our brains are too big, as humans, like
Yeah.
compared to like the animal kingdom. You know what I mean? It's just like it's too much that we're like looking for all these reasons why I'm this way, and it all is tied to our egos. Yeah, it's just like it's too much. We're all trying to find meaning for why we're
Yes.
here, and
Yeah.
that's like because of our brains are so big. Like rather than just like living, right? And see, like, so I'm trying to get to the point where I'm just like living rather than like finding meaning in everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Well, I'm just like in the world, and that's what music does for me.
Yeah.
It brings me to the place of now, and it doesn't matter where I'm from or any of that. Like it brings me to place now and the past of human evolution, because the rhythms and they're tied to our ancestors, you know what I mean, and so that's where I'm trying to live. Does that make sense?
No, it does. And I love like this, like there was something in there that just really like stuck out to me. And it's like, it's this connectivity.
Yeah.
And like speaking into that, what does it feel like to create music? Because for me, I think I now have a visual representation, at least for me.
Yeah.
Um, the movie, the movie Soul. I don't know if you ever got to see it. It was a Pixar movie. It came out during the pandemic
No, I missed that.
with
No,
Jamie Foxx.
I wanted to see it. Yeah.
So in the movie, they talk about this experience that when you're really in it and you get lost, and I feel that way when I'm performing.
Right.
I say it's like a blanking out, but it's not. And that perfectly explained it, because in the movie, if you've watched it, it's like you get lost in the rhythm of and the soul of creation.
Yeah.
And the soul of and I say creation in a very like broad sense of
Yeah.
when you play music, when you make art, you are creating out of nothing. You're creating out of just
Yeah.
this space in your brain that really has
Yeah.
no, like, yes, you can try to typify it scientifically, but
Yeah.
it really is not understandable, because where
Yeah.
does that come from? And it comes from within like
Yeah.
the soul, the alma.
Yeah.
And so for you creating music, what is like your process of connecting?
Well, so back to that, like even the music that I create, let's say it's me, blah blah blah. It actually is from somewhere else because it's tied to everything I've learned up to this point
Mhm.
about whatever music I'm doing or where I'm at in the stage. It's tied to what I've been listening to. It's tied to what I've seen, like the environment. So it's not like necessarily mine. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah.
ours, right?
Yeah. So like creation, just I get it. Like the intellectual property of it all. Like
yeah,
there's an understanding, us as artists,
yeah,
and in another sense, unfortunately, business people.
right. Well, yeah,
There is an understanding. Like,
right.
yes, you want to protect something because
Totally.
you are getting
Yeah.
money
Right.
and financial stability
Yeah,
from that thing. And if
exactly.
someone takes it, okay, I got you.
That's what we use to survive in this society.
Yes,
and
in
what
this
we've
society.
what we've done. Yeah.
And
yes.
but outside of that, it, especially like lately, I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah.
There's been lawsuit after lawsuit
Oh, right.
over melodic lines.
Yeah.
Over like things that it's like, yo, how do you learn music and how do
Right.
you feel about that? Like in
Yeah.
this current environment that there's just constantly lawsuits over a melodic line or
Yeah.
possible similarity, when really there's only so many music notes you can use. Like you can't create
True.
new music notes. You can't create a C, I don't know, a C triple sharp. That doesn't like that's
Yeah.
weird. Like I don't know how to explain that.
I mean,
but that's
yeah,
what
everyone's trying to grab for money. I get it. And that's, yeah, I mean, but like you can't say that like Ed Sheeran's song, for instance,
Mhm.
isn't Let's Get It On. Like, I don't know. Like, it's like, to me, when I hear that song, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, that's Let's Get It On.
Okay.
So, and just to come out and say like, it's not, but it has like the same, it's the same tempo, it's the same key, or maybe it's a different key, but it's the same. It's just like,
Syncopation, like
yeah.
different.
And I know that Ed probably, because I don't know if, I think it's probably right that, because the melody, because the way the law defines what it is melody, it's not chords and rhythm. So I get it, but, I mean, Ed listened to Marvin Gaye and was like, "Ding, chicka, I mean, that's the song. I mean, that's just what it is.
Well,
So
it's
yeah, like,
it's like the same situation happened with Radiohead and Lana Del Rey,
oh, I don't
where
even know that one.
there was a
Okay,
song that was really similar.
okay,
There is one out there. Just look
right,
it up. I
okay,
cannot remember off the top of my brain, but
yeah,
it's like it happens a lot, and it's
yeah,
just like there's a sense of, like we were talking earlier, ego.
yeah,
It's very ego, like,
yeah,
oh, it's mine, it's
right,
original, and I want a full 200% or 100, however it works.
yeah,
And by the way, we'll get into those numbers and
okay,
why that is, and the
yeah,
craziness of that. But um, there's a lot, again, it goes back to ego
yeah,
and money and
yeah,
financial stability.
yeah,
And people don't want to give it up. They're not really, more often than not,
yeah,
willing to give up anything, because it's a big it's a big machine.
yeah.
It's a
Well,
big money machine.
yeah, I mean, well, I think it's also like a lot of people will put a song up that they want their song to be like, and then they
Mm,
start creating underneath that. And so
mm.
that's the part where it's like, you get into like trouble, you know what I mean? Because then it will sound, but if it's just in your imagination, like I could go through 5 or 6 bass lines in Ozomatli that in my mind are from another song,
Okay.
because this was what I was thinking, oh, how did that like Bob Marley bass line go? Let me add this to this cumbia,
Mm.
right? And so I did that, but like when you hear it, and I tell you, you're gonna be like, oh, I see,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll never think of it. Like, you know what I mean? And that's the
Yes.
difference, right? Like, but if you hear, like, if I know Marvin Gaye's tune, like in my heart, like I know Let's
Mm.
Get It On. And then when I hear Ed Sheeran on the radio, like to me, I'm like, oh, that is that. Like, you know
Mm.
what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
like, and that's where it's like,
It's dicey.
you have to like, yeah, you just,
It's
it's
a dicey world out there.
yeah. But
And it's
then there's like the
interesting.
blurred lines one too.
Well, the blurred line ones was like straight up
Like the rhythm and the feeling, "I'm partying," right? It comes from that tune, like, and it's just like the
well, the
rhythm.
problem also
Yeah,
was that it was like literally when they put them right next to each other, it's like, bro,
I know.
that one was, I feel, a more
Yeah,
clear
yeah,
cut, like you couldn't fight that one.
right.
Ed Sheeran could.
Yeah,
But it's interesting you bring that up, like about kind of in your head, but
yeah.
not putting it on the
Right, and
track.
don't listen to it before. Don't listen to the song that you're biting before you start creating.
Yes.
Right? Like it's like just do it from what your memory tells you that it feels like.
Don't listen to the song you're biting
Yeah,
before creating.
like yeah. So it's just
Yes.
like so I'm just like
So
whenever
play a game of telephone with yourself.
yeah, yeah,
Oh.
exactly. Like every time like every
That's
one of my bass lines comes from somewhere else in my mind, something I've listened to, in
Mhm.
my mind. And like, and so I'm creating it and I'm like, oh, this feels like that one. Let me like go that direction of what I remember it being.
Mhm.
Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then something else will come out, but it's not just like
In a cover culture that somehow has flipped, because
yeah,
that's what's been a big thing. Now everybody's doing covers, so it's almost like you
yeah,
can't help but fall into it.
right. Yeah.
But I think what's interesting when you bring that up is the process of us creating a song together.
Yeah.
Because I had the
Right.
blessed opportunity
Yeah.
to work with you in
Yeah.
the studio,
Yeah.
and we were listening to it in the car.
Okay.
Remember,
Yeah.
we went and got coffee and we listened to
Yeah.
it in the
Yeah.
car. And I said, "Oh, this sounds like a Cyndi Lauper tune."
Right.
And you said,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, for me it sounds like this." And so
Yeah.
it's like
It
in our-
does sound like a Cyndi Lauper tune.
But-
Because I started listening to like True Colors and
Yes.
Time After Time.
Yes.
And then also Sade.
Yes. Oh my God.
It
yes,
has
that's the
like
one you
those,
said.
right?
Yes.
It has like Sade in
Yes.
there. It
My
has,
mom
like,
has said, "Oh,
yeah.
that's Sade."
No, yeah, and
But
that's
it
the
was a
thing.
vibe.
It is a vibe. It is, and I'm really proud of it.
Because it's us pretty much saying like, "Oh, hey, this is what's happening. This is
Yeah.
what's going on," and how it all comes together. How music comes together is always just so amazing.
Yeah.
We're talking about music. We're talking about the business of music.
Hmm.
And we got to work together. Do you know how that happened? Do you recall the story I gave you?
Wasn't it from Dusty, right?
No.
DJ Dusty. Oh no.
No.
Okay.
It was oh my God. His name, I have it right here because I just messaged him.
Oh, Ray.
Yes.
Yeah, Ray. That's right.
Yes.
It was from Ray.
So Ray and I were in a Twitter when Twitter was still Twitter. There was like a little grupito that would be like, oh, Latino Tuesday or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And so a bunch of like creatives would get together on there and on what they called like that podcasting broadcasting section.
Yeah.
And we would all chat.
Oh, wow.
And randomly somebody goes, oh, hey, Veronica's a musician. You should talk to Ray.
Oh.
And then they were like, oh, yeah. And so then Ray reached out to me. And then Ray's like, hey, I know Wil-Dog. Do you want to like just like link up with him?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I mean, he's a little bit higher level than me. I don't know if he'd want to work with me. Like, understand, like, I have learned through you and Dusty and a few other people over the last 2 years how small the industry is versus how big I thought it was and how low, where on the totem pole I was.
Okay, yeah.
Because there's a sense of like, you're here, these people are there, will they work with you, what's going on? And so when I like, it was funny because I think he says, oh yeah, I gave him your Instagram. And then that's how it all happened. Like we managed to like figure it out.
Okay,
And so I ended up telling Dusty and Dusty's like, well, that's great. And then, so it like all worked itself out.
That's cool. Yeah.
It all worked itself out. And like producing or watching you produce, watching you work on this song that's been part of the story of my record was really nice because you got to listen to it. You got to listen to what we had done at the time so far. Yeah. And so it just created such a different tone. Yeah. And really just, it's absolutely what I wanted. I didn't realize that it was the missing piece for a final bit of storytelling that I needed to tell.
Sweet.
That's what I realized.
Nice. Good. I'm glad that I'm so honored just to be a part of that, you know? Yeah. Thank you. It's great. I loved it. Yeah. But the whole thing about the totem pole, it's like it depends on what group you are, where you're in. It's just like any other, like when you go to school or whatever, and in this group, I'm kind of like the last person, but in this group, I'm like the leader. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the same in life and in music too. I'm not always like up here, you know? Oftentimes I'm like down here, and that's where I'm comfortable being like I like learning more than, you know what I mean? I'm a student, so I enjoy learning. So I like being the person that's like learning or like the bottom of the totem pole or whatever. I enjoy that. So to me, it's like I relate to what you're saying. Even though you're talking about me, about being up here, like I relate to that because I'm not always like the top dog, you know, in any scenario. You know what I mean?
I will say, like outside, and that's
like,
it's interesting the perception that we have of ourselves versus the perception that the world has of us.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because like I think about what you're saying, like, hey, you know what, I'm at different places. Yeah. And I'm flexible and I'm fluid. Yeah. Versus the rest of the industry, like the way other industry members will look at you. It's like, oh, well, like, you know, that's Wil-Dog. He's worked with X, Y, Z. Like there's
then there's people like,
there's your CV.
But then there's people saying, yeah, Wil-Dog's probably not, he hasn't done enough stuff, you know?
I'm sorry.
No, but there would be, you know what I mean?
Insane.
Well, it depends on where you are. That's what I'm saying. There's people that are doing like, I don't know, that are, you know, I don't know, maybe producing Caliuchis or something, you know what I mean? Where I'm not doing that. So it's like all good.
But like there's enough for everybody.
There is, and there's space for you, you know, there's space for you. And because when you create, you're creating the space by putting out the music, you know, you're creating your space, and that's what it is. And so and who determines that? Not you, not me. Like, you know, the people who are, the listener determines, that's what it is. The listener decides, or your fan base, however big or small it is, decides where you're going to be, you know, and
just, you know, I was mentioning earlier, but you sent me your like the full like breadth of work, and it's just, it almost feels like you're constantly a student in music.
I am. No, I absolutely am. Because I mean, when the pandemic came and we stopped touring, I went to online junior college and took
Really?
music because I'm not classically trained in anything, and I don't really know how to read music, and I don't play piano very well. I don't completely understand theory. I mean, I guess that's not totally true. I don't understand theory. What it is like I am where I am. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I do understand some theory, and I could always be better. So I was 3 semesters. I took
Wow.
jazz piano, jazz harmony. Um,
Working with you guys in the
yeah,
studio and with Mariano over
yeah.
in Corpus, I was like, okay, I'm gonna take guitar classes.
Oh,
And
good.
and it
Yeah,
was and it
yeah,
was crazy, like going, okay, like I am going to allow myself to be a student because there's just this perception that you can't learn as you're older.
Oh, hell no.
But it's just
Yeah,
it's so weird because they're like,
yeah,
oh, you have to have done it when you were young and you have to be
yeah.
practically a prodigy. And I'm like, that makes no sense.
No,
Like
I'm not a prodigy.
I'm neither am I.
Nah.
But I've learned more as I've grown, and I think that experience and that ability to just be human
Yeah.
instead of perfection
Yep.
is where I'm like, okay, I'm good. But just to hear like, hey, you've produced all this stuff, you've done all this stuff, but yet you're going back to junior college. And so,
Yeah.
you know, that's so
Yeah.
inspiring to know that,
Hmm.
you're willing to do that and be that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I did. I invested in myself. So like when I was coming up listening to music, I always knew I was a musician, but I didn't have like access to
Mm-hmm.
be a musician. Like there was no family members in my family that were musicians, and but luckily my parents got me into a magnet school, which is like a public school in LA that would focus on performing arts.
Mm-hmm.
And there, got to take dance lessons. I played trombone from 3rd grade to like 7th grade, and then I danced like through middle school, and then my best friend, who was the best drummer in the world, I followed him because he wanted to go to Hamilton Music Academy, which is
Mm-hmm.
another public school in LA, but you have to try out to get in
Mm-hmm.
music. So I tried out for guitar, and at Hamilton, and David Sears, the teacher, was like, "Yeah, you're not good enough, to play guitar. Like, I'm sorry." And I'm like, "I could play drums." So I ran to the drum set, and he's like, "Play a 5-stroke roll." I didn't know what a 5-stroke roll was, but I could play the beat from Walk This Way, like Run DMC and
Okay.
Aerosmith, like. Boom, boom, I played that, and he's like, "Okay, you got good rhythm, so you can be in my drum ensemble, but you're gonna have to practice a lot." So I got in, like I hustled my way in, and I played in there, and that's where I met Asdru, who's in Ozomatli, and I was there for a year, and then I ended up getting kicked out. But I always knew I was a musician inside of me, and it wasn't until I was like 19 when my best friend, the drummer Andy, his band needed a bass player because the bass player quit. I remember it was like December 6th, and they had a gig on New Year's, and the bass player quit like 3 weeks before, and he's like, "You got to play bass for us." So I like literally picked up bass and like learned like 10 songs like in 3 weeks on bass, and that's how I became a bass player. And just because I had the rhythm, I'm really like a drummer that plays bass. So
Okay.
I had the rhythm, so I could play like one note as long as it landed with the kick. It sounded good in a song.
Okay.
So I was like boom, 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 and I would just play like the kicks.
Wow.
That's all I would play, and I would play like one note, like doom, 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 dum, 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 and like that's all I could play because I could only use like one finger, and so I got through that gig, and I just with that, and we were playing with this like 30-year-old guitar player at that time, which was ancient to us, and he was a virtuoso, so he expected a lot right away, and that was like the best situation because I learned so much from him. I had to learn these licks that like really quickly, and so I started, but the desire, a desire to do it is better than talent. always. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you have talent and desire, like you're winning, right? Like those virtuosos that you talk about, where all they care about is music and they practice constantly. But just because you have like the God
talent.
gift or whatever doesn't mean you're going to have the work ethic, you know, to do it. So I always pick the kid that's like going to work, or always say that person's going to make it when they like willing to like put themselves in the fire, willing to get uncomfortable, you know, and over time, you know, I would make a little bit of money, and I was living way below my means, you know, like way below. You know, I think my rent was like $150, and I was like renting a closet from a family and like in the hood, like, and that's where my bed was. And
So your bed was the closet.
it was like, it was like a walk-in closet. So I had like my bed, and I think I could fit like a rack of clothes, and that was it. Wow. You know, and so I lived way below my means, but whenever I got some money, like I remember when Ozomatli, we got like $5,000 all of a sudden. And that was like, I had like $200 saved at that time, and I got $5,000, you know? And so I bought a piece of equipment. And like by being in Ozomatli and like going into studios and learning, oh, this is a compressor, this is a mic pre, and oh, what does it do? This is what it sounds like. This is what it does. I started investing in those things because I believed in my ear. You know, even though it wasn't developed yet, I believed in my taste for music. I believed in my ability to be a producer, to be a musician, just really a musician and a producer. So I started investing in myself to eventually building a studio, you know, and just little by little. Because you see all that shit I got in my studio, right? It's a lot, right? Yes. It didn't all come like on one day, you know? All that stuff, it started 30 years ago, you know? And and I keep adding and keep investing in it because one, I enjoy it. And two, I believe in my ability to create things that I enjoy creating. That's number one, right? It's not about anybody else, you know? It's about like it's the pressure I put on myself to do it because I've always wanted that, you know what I mean? So I go for it. You got to go for it.
There's so much there for me to like. I think one of the things that like I'm just an emotional person.
All right, yeah.
Let me be clear. I'm just an emotional human being. But like hearing you say like I trusted my ear as a producer. And I think like coming into this album with you, with Marcial, with Mariano, with Dusty, I came into it constantly being told I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I don't know my own ear.
Yeah.
And that kind of like gets in your head after a while. And so, but walking in with all of y'all, you know, me talking to you about like, oh, hey, this sounds like this sounds like that.
Yeah.
And being able to just click that way.
Yeah.
And getting a producer credit on this and like having ownership of that ear and understanding that. You understood it at a young age. I feel like from so much time, I'm finally in a place where I'm like, I'm too old for this shit. I'm too old to be told like I don't know music.
And
like
told
I've been
by who?
And it's just like exactly by who?
And
who are they?
And and those people infiltrate our own brains and about ourselves. Because I have that same shit. Because I've been told I'm not good enough before, always, you know, like always. And like I play bad notes and you suck and blah, blah, blah. That's how you hear it. Rah, rah, rah. And that gets in. But ultimately, it's like, what are you feeling? Like even when because I did shit to this song that you didn't like. You know what I mean? Yes. Right? Like how many revisions did we do? Like, you know what I mean? Right? Like
a good bit.
But it's because it's that trial and error, right?
Yeah.
Like let's try. I'm hearing something here. Fuck, I don't really know what it is, but I'm just going to try this. Remember that like bad bass note, right? Like,
yes.
Because I was like, I need some tension. Like I wanted something there, right? Yes. And then you came back, you and everybody else. everybody else, but like me and Marcial were like, okay, that's cool. And I would send it to like other people I know, like music teachers and stuff. And they're like, yeah, nah, I don't like it either. You know what I mean?
But it's
yeah. You know what I'm
it's
saying?
understanding the
Yeah,
process, because
yeah.
it's like, especially like when you walk in, it's like, I'm not someone to tell him that he doesn't know what he's
But
doing.
it's your song.
But it's my song. So like
Yeah.
it's like there's always a place to meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's also, again, going back to what you said, trusting your ear and trusting your gut and being able to be like, hey, you know what? Like, because I know for a fact, verbalizing what it is hard as musicians.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know there's a bunch of memes like where people go, oh, I want it mixed to sound like The Color Purple. And you're
Right,
like,
yeah.
what the
Exactly.
hell does that mean?
We always hear that, yeah, by non-musicians, yeah.
But
'cause-
it's the
yeah.
verbalization. It's
Right.
knowing that this person is coming from a place of like color is how they explain
Right.
and verbalize sound. But for
Yeah.
me, thankfully, I've been in the studio enough where I can go,
Yeah.
well, it's kind of I
Yeah.
explained it different, and
Yeah.
everybody has their own mode of
Yeah.
explaining. And so,
Yeah.
you guys working and understanding that. And, for people who want to be producers or want to,
Yeah.
songwrite, it is a collaborative process.
Yeah. And it's always best if you're able to sing what you want.
Oh my God, yes.
Like whatever it is, like boom, 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 boom. That's what I want, And you can go if you don't have the music language, but you're able to just sing it. Like that's better than anything to me.
That's
Like,
what
you know
I've
what I mean?
done over
Yeah.
the last few years, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I am valid.
Yeah, because it's music. Like you can learn all this like because basically what happened was we had music as humans, and then we had people that were like figuring out how to explain music, right? Like put it on paper, and that's where the notes came in. But that's not like notes aren't music. Like notes on a piece of paper, they're just telling the musician like
It's like a map.
what to play, right? Yeah. So it's not, but in of itself, it's not music. But if you're singing it, that's music. Like right away, you're doing it. Like
It's physically coming from your body.
That's why I always tell people like before, like you got to be able to play. Like if you're trying to go like with that swing, you have to be able to sing it and feel it in your body, like. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Speaking on vocalizing,
Yeah.
it clicked for me that the way I produce and the way my ear is valid
Yeah.
is because I sing. And there is working tracks at the studio for this album where I'm singing like an accordion lick, like how I would possibly like it to sound. And we were in the studio and we were listening like after a session to for the first time for me, Michael Jackson
Yeah.
without all of those
Yeah.
tracks for the final, and just how he put a guide track
Yep.
of rhythm section.
Exactly.
Guide track for his like possible melodic lines
Yep.
for the guitar.
Yep.
And he's singing it.
Exactly.
He is not playing an
that's
instrument.
all
He's literally
you need.
singing it.
But, okay, I will say, yes, he is, and that's incredible. He does have the resources to do that because he had the resources to get whatever musician he wanted to
And they
play
got
those.
it.
They got it. I'm never gonna like diss like playing an instrument.
No.
You know what I mean? I'm never gonna say like, oh, you don't need to play. You don't need to play an instrument, because when you can play an instrument, you can do it yourself too. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So you know what I mean? You don't have to bring in other people. But it's always good to work with people too. I'm just saying, I'm not gonna like say you know what, you could just sing your parts to people and you never have to learn an instrument. It's always good just to like.
I guess it's just more
able to pick-
validating the voice as an instrument.
Totally.
Because I think a lot of the
Yeah.
times when it comes to solo artists and just vocalists,
Yep.
there's a sense of like, you don't play an instrument.
right.
You are not an
Yeah,
artist
that
or a
whole thing.
musician. And it's a big pain in the ass.
Yeah.
It's a lot of gatekeeping where there doesn't
So just
need to
don't
be
work with those people. You don't need to.
You already heard him.
No
He said
matter
don't
how,
work with them.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
or negotiate a different way of working with them, and whatever, and like also in the studio, like I let people have their egos too, you know what I mean? If you have the forefront, because a lot of people will like, the egos will like clash in the studio, right? Because, and I guess what I try to do is just like, okay, that if you're like just tripping on it, that's cool. Like, go ahead. You know what I mean? I'll change it after you leave. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like,
Do your thing.
You know what I mean?
Whatever.
Do your thing. Because in the studio, I don't want to impede the process. So I just like try to keep it light, try to keep it. But I used to be different. I used to be like, no, it has to be this way right now. I used to have like my ego was like in control more.
So what changed?
I don't know. I changed, I guess. It just doesn't matter as much. You know what I'm saying? Like, and now like with Pro Tools, you know, I could always manipulate it later. But sometimes it's like a lack of ability too, because not everybody can do what I want them to do, and I can't do what everybody wants me to do either. So there's like sometimes there's just a lack of ability to do what the other person is looking for.
Yeah.
You know. Because there was this guy that used to use my studio a lot, and he's like a younger guy, and I'm like, man, I could play on your songs, like they're easy, you know. But then I got in there, and I was playing bass, and he was producing me, right? He's like probably 30 years younger than me, right? And he was producing me. He's like, no, I want it more like this, and like quickly we realized like, man, maybe I'm the wrong bass player for this, you know? And in my mind, I could do it. You know what I mean? I could do it. But like now I'm more like, okay, yeah, I'm not for everything. You know, I'm not. Like I have my lane, and my lanes are I have a pretty wide lane, but there's certain shit like I can't, that I'm not like completely proficient on, you know? And it's just what it is.
Early in 2020, I was in an accident, and the consequences I was living with afterwards was a lot to handle all at once. So if you're like me and trying to recover while trying not to lose your car, lose work and therefore money, and super injured, and have a huge growing stack of hospital bills to pay, then you need a professional to get the care you need. In case of an accident, you need a lawyer to protect your rights and your wallet. And honestly, you don't have to look any further than that simple phrase by going to incaseofanaccident.com or encasodeaccidente.com for a free consultation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if the person who suffered the accident wasn't you, but maybe it was your tia, your abuelita, or your second cousin twice removed, don't worry. Everyone at incaseofanaccident.com or encasodeaccidente.com can speak Spanish, hablan español, and they can take text messages on WhatsApp at 888-990-0911. Don't forget to tell them that Veronique Medrano from Accordion to Me sent you. You don't want the vibes to end? Accordion to Me, you're in luck because I'm the advertiser. You hear that? Go listen to my music on your favorite streaming platform by searching Veronique Medrano. The songs that you need to add to your playlist right now are Mezcal Maria featuring Beatriz Gonzalez and my new Spanish Tejano country tune, Que Hueva, that recently won Nashville's Music Row magazine's Discovery Award. Also, if you're wanting to sport some merch, we'll be launching pod and music merch on my website, www.veroniquemedrano.com. New merch will go each month, so hurry while it lasts and get some matching merch for you and your mom. You know, so she wants some new swag? Boop, boop. This has been your paid ad read. Boop, boop. Ozomatli,
Yeah.
how did that come together? Finally, you had been doing your own thing. You were doing, and from what I'm understanding, you knew some of these people when you were young.
Yeah.
And so, how did it finally come to form?
Well, I was playing in two bands at that time. I was playing with Macy Gray.
Okay.
Yeah. I was part of like her first band.
Okay.
Before she was signed. So I was playing in that, and we were like doing really well. We had like label interest, blah, blah, blah. And I was playing in another band called Mesh of Mind that was like acid jazz, funk kind of stuff. But then I was working for the LA Conservation Corps, which is like it's like an organization that gives like inner city youth jobs.
Okay.
But we ended up starting a union there and going on strike, and we held a sit-in in our building. So we like locked the building down, And we ended up, through a mediation process, getting fired from the job, but we got to keep the building for like 2 years, with the Conservation Corps agreeing to pay for the expenses. And so we started a cultural community center dedicated to arts and inner city youth.
Wow.
And to raise money for that, that's when the band came together. Like we're gonna have these parties, so like,
So also was a community thing.
yeah, it was like, yeah, we got together to raise money for this center. Yeah. And so we just
Wow.
called all of our homies down, and they were from like all different, in my mind, like I had an idea of what I wanted to do, right?
Okay.
Like I had an idea, but it was kind of like, so I had this idea of what I wanted to do, and it was kind of like Indian funk with salsa and reggae and like, you know what I mean? Because I was hanging out with this guy named Jito, who was teaching me about like classical Indian music, who's in our band now, and I was hanging out with him and I was listening to a lot of like Bill Laswell, who's like a dope producer and bass player, and then I was playing with Raul on his like he had songs. So I told like Anton, like, call Raul because he has songs. We need songs. And he was playing like, they were kind of like Latino folk songs,
Okay.
like some boleros and like some soca stuff. And I was like, call that dude because he has those songs, And then I also called like our DJ, Cut Chemist, who I was playing with, and because he brought like a hip hop element. And so we got to, and then Uli and Fredo, they were playing in a ska band called Yeska, and they could pretty much do anything, And so we called all these people down and just started creating, and the creating came from like, hey, Raul, show us these songs, And so we were like, okay, so we got 3 songs here. Yo, Cut, remember that beat we did for, he was in a band called, he's in the Jurassic 5. I don't know if you heard of that group.
No, I have not.
Cut,
But
they're like a rap group. Like, let's do that beat. So we would add that beat, and I would do like Crunchy was our sax player. I was like, solo over that, and then we had like a percussionist, and he was like, okay, well, let's do this Afro-Cuban thing here. And so we kind of all like learned from each other, and every song was just different. It was just like whatever we wanted it to be, or whatever each person wanted it to be. Like they had an idea, and we're like, yeah, let's do it. Because we had one rehearsal, and the gig was like the next day. Yeah. So it was like March 31st. Is there 31 days in March?
Yes.
30 days in September? Yeah, okay. So it was like March 31st, and our gig was April 1st.
Okay.
So we had like a rehearsal on March 31st, and we just need enough tunes to get through a gig.
Okay.
So we did. And we put together all these like jams and songs, and we played the next day.
And so from then
it started morphing, and some of those members left, and we continued from there. We played at that center exclusively for probably 3 months, I would say, and then we started playing art galleries in downtown LA, and then and then like at one of those art gallery openings that we played at, like the lady from the Viper Room in Hollywood that was the booker then. Got my number.
I've heard a lot about the Viper Room. What is the ooh la la about it?
Well, okay, Johnny Depp opened it. He was
Okay.
the original owner.
Okay.
Yeah, River Phoenix died outside of it. Yeah, he OD'd like on the sidewalk, I believe.
Jeez.
Right outside of it. So it has like,
Like cultural significance.
yeah,
more than one way.
yeah. I mean, like our first gig there, like I was literally paid by Johnny Depp. Yeah. like it was a trip. I walk into the office. He's like, hey man, he's behind. He's like, hey man, like, I love your band. You guys are great. Here's whatever
Here's
it
your
was,
paycheck.
$300 or whatever it was. Yeah, I don't remember. And I was like, holy shit, that was Johnny Depp. Like, yeah.
It just feels like that's just a norm. Like
I mean,
celebrities own stuff. You just engage it just with everybody. Everybody in the creative space.
Yeah.
That's anybody.
Yeah.
Is here at some point in time, and you rub elbows with them at some point.
Yeah. Well, they were like, a lot of people were supporters of us too. Like Selma Hayek used to come. Like, Drew Barrymore. Yeah, when we started playing in Hollywood, it started getting out that there's this cool band, Ozomatli, that does all this stuff. And so, yeah, we would have like, there would be people, Yeah, and that's just what happened. I mean, they like to have fun too, you know. They're humans that just happen to be on a screen, you know, like they happen to have a camera in front of their face all the time. You know what I mean? They're good actors, you know, and like.
So on your
like,
on your occupations list, it does say bassist, but I love the fact that there is a also known as on your Wikipedia page.
Okay.
And we went over Breakdance Willie, which obviously came from, you magnet school, all this different stuff.
Yeah, and I was breakdancing. Well, I'm from MacArthur Park area, which is where there was a famous center called Radio, and called Radiotron, that was in Break-In, the first Break-In. It was like a non-legal center that didn't have permits, that was like where breakdancing in LA was like the hub of breakdancing in LA, and I grew up there, going there since I was very young. So that's where that comes from too. I wasn't a good breakdancer, but I wanted to be, you know, and I was just like too big, you know, my body was like too big, like to have like that coordination that you need to do things like that. You know, I grew like too fast, too
quick.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And like it was always like the shorter dudes that were like, meow, you know. And but I always
just
wanted
spinning
to
like a top, man.
I always wanted to be, and so
and then you are also known as El Gavachillo.
El Gavachillo, yeah.
And so that was its own thing. So there's Ozomatli, and then there's your alter ego, El Gavachillo.
Yeah.
So, and we went over that in the studio, but I would love for you to illuminate people on that persona.
Okay, yeah. I mean, so growing up, I hated regional Mexican music.
Really?
Like, hated. I grew up in a Central American community.
Okay.
In LA. And, you know, it was, I would hear the cars bump, 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 you know, driving by. But most of the music in my neighborhood was, you know, and so, or merengue, you know, it was like, and so it was more like tropical music. And then whenever like the banda or norteño was playing, it always sounded like German bar music to me.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
See that.
Like, yeah, because it's like waltz and polka.
And it's just very...
Yeah, it's very rigid, right? Like the African elements are hidden; they don't come through as much.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But in high school, I dated this woman like straight from Michoacan. Like got here like 3 days before like we went out, and she loved banda, So she would take me. And she would only listen to banda music, and I'd be like, "This shit sucks." So but then I went to a club and I saw like banda live.
Okay.
Like for the first time.
And that changed everything.
And that changed my life. It changed my life because it was 19. I remember counting. It's 19 people. I'm like, holy shit. There's 3 trumpets. There's 3 valve trombones. There's 3 clarinets. There's 2 chacheta, and they double on conga and güiro. And there's a tuba player, there's a tarola player that plays timbal. It like weird looking timbales. They're all low, you know, and they're all dead, and a snare and a cymbal. And then they stop. It's like, and they're and then they stop. And then all of a sudden the tuba takes over. And I was just like, and then there's a tambora player, I
know what you're talking about.
Bass drum.
Yes.
And with the cymbal, like circus shit, you know? And I was like, this is incredible. And like the sound that comes off of that is magical. It's so like pierces through everything, and it's like...
And you talking about that, I have seen banda live. I have actually made a point to watch more YouTube videos of it, because that really captures that.
Yeah.
When you're talking about trying to capture this big, magical, larger than life sound into a recording for your ears.
Yeah.
There's a balance, but it's not the same.
No,
feeling.
It's unlike any other music, and it has its own rules and its own like language within it. And so I just started getting I started admiring it more and more, and I started like buying CDs at this time and like having them. I had like the 6 CD changer in my car. So I'd have 6 CDs. It was all banda. And I was like, started studying the music. I ended up getting a tuba because my band members.
Were you living in that shoebox of a
No, this was after that. This was
okay,
after
I was
when
about
I got
to
the
say,
tuba.
how were you?
No.
Like you were gonna just be.
By this time, I continuously listened to banda, but I never thought I would like be a part of banda. Like, you know what I mean? It was just like I love the music. Banda more than norteño. And then my band, they got like sponsored by Selmer Horns. Or Selma, I think it's Selmer. And they got sponsored. And I happened to walk by when they were putting the list together. I was like, what are you guys doing? They're like, oh, we're putting the list of all the things, all the instruments we want from Selmer. And I was like, can you please put tuba on there? Like, you're not going to get a tuba. And I'm like, just put it on there. Like, if they send it, they send it. If they don't, they don't.
That's the only thing they sent.
No.
No.
They got every instrument, and they sent a $10,000 tuba to my crib.
So this tuba comes in, and
so
now you have the responsibility
to learn tuba and banda tuba, which is the hardest. Like getting those short notes, like, and running those major scales. Like, dang. So I started taking lessons. Actually, I went to ELAC, and there was a tuba player named Chewy there, and he started giving me lessons. And I quickly realized that it was too big of like hurdle for me to do. So I put the tuba away, and I'm like, I'll come back to it, at some point. But it's like, it's not like something you could just pick up. Like, you need to practice like all the time. And it was just too much for me at that time. So I put it under the garage, and, I would say maybe like 10 years later, we were playing at the Hollywood Bowl.
Okay.
And I wanted to get a banda to come and play with us on our last song. Because we have a ranchera called La Misma Canción. And so I had this idea. I was like, let's get a real banda. So I went to like Huntington Park and found the banda with the Los Twins, Culiacan. Anyways, they're like famous producers, Los Twins. I don't know if you know Commander. They brought like Commander Al and a bunch of other people. And so I hit them up. I got their number from a friend of mine, Josh. And I hit him up, and he's like, yeah, claro que sí. I was like, estamos buscando una banda para tocar con nosotros ahí in Hollywood Bowl, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, claro que sí. And so we found this banda called Banda La Juvenil in Huntington Park, and they were like practicing in an alley in a garage. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. They're badass. So we brought them to rehearsal. And then when, like, in Los Ensayos, like we would take a break from the song, and I was like, hey, do you know La Baraja? And I would ask like different songs. They're like, yeah. And I was like, play it. And I would, because we had the PA there, and they were already set up. So I started singing like the songs I knew. I was like, do you know Árboles de la Barranca? And they're like, yeah. And I started just singing it, like fucking around in the breaks. And they were like, holy shit, like, how do you know all these songs? And obviously I was like way out of tune. I'm a horrible singer. And
you did great.
Whatever.
If you want to look up El Gavachillo, there are videos.
I mean, I got better. I took lessons. I took it seriously. And
you're great.
And
Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah, so we played Hollywood Bowl, and then we had an after party, and the banda showed up, and they were like, queremos tocar, güey, pero tú tienes que cantar con nosotros. And I was like, fuck. And I was like, ¿por qué? And like, era tu gente, because it was an after party to my show. And so I got up there and I sang whatever songs I knew, and I loved it. And I just like had this, and from there I was like, oh, I could be a fucking banda singer. Like, holy shit. Like, that's easier than playing tuba, like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, obviously it's not, but it has its own challenges. So I just started booking gigs. Like, just started fucking calling up like Eastside Love and like, hey, Willie, the owner, and like, I got this new banda project, and I call it Wil-Dog Isu Banda. And but then when I started playing like for like Mexicanos, like real like paisas, like the word dog doesn't really translate, like, because that's like just like that's a street name in the US, but it doesn't translate. Because when I started getting more into it, I was like, I'm gonna go for this. Like, I'm gonna go for I should have probably just kept Wil-Dog, but everybody was asking me if I was like half Latino. You know what I mean? Like, are you mitad? Are you like, you know what I mean? Because my Spanish is like good enough, like where I sound pocho, like you know what I mean? Like, where I don't sound like typical gringo, I guess. And I wanted my name to be like to say white, because I wanted it to be clear. You know?
wanted it to be super clear.
I wanted to be clear, like that I'm not half, because it was always getting confused.
Yeah.
Because also like the way I carry myself and stuff, I guess.
And the community that you grew up.
Yeah, and where I grew up, so
just,
it's like I had to assimilate. So I am the way I am just because it's the way I am, and so, but I wanted to be clear because I wanted it to be clear that no, there's a white person. Because at this time, it wasn't like the music that it is now. It wasn't the biggest song in the world. It wasn't. It was almost like if you weren't even like Mexican, you didn't necessarily like banda. Like, or grew up around, you know what I mean? Mexican. It was very culturally, I mean, this is like 20 years ago we're talking, It was like, it was very,
niche.
Yeah, it was niche. It was like, and so I wanted it to be known that no, there's a white person that cares about this music and is doing this music, right? And there's a guy from, where's he from? Burke, Albuquerque, named El Gringo, doing it. But he was doing more Tejano music kind of.
Yeah, Tejano blend.
Yeah, with country and stuff. And El Gringo or Gringuito or whatever, it just sounds too nice.
Yeah, it
I
sounds too soft.
And I'm rough. I'm more like I'm rough around the edges. I'm not like clean around, you know what I mean? I have there's like a harshness to me, right? Like
there's an
edge.
Yeah, there's a bit of an edge that life has given you.
And gavacho is like a derogatory term for a white person in Mexico.
Okay.
But gavachillo, it's also the music is like known to be from Sinaloa, right? Banda. And in Sinaloa, they don't say ito, they say illo. Right? So, and like Tigrillo, there's all the artists that come from there.
Yes, Los Trigrillos.
Trigrillos, they're all from Sinaloa. So I wanted to be part of that lineage. I was taking from that. So instead of being gavachito, I made it gavachillo just to like, but then I spell it wrong because everybody spells it with a B, gabacho, but I spell it with a V. So it shows you how illiterate I am, dyslexic, and I'm like, white pocho guy.
Well, it like just kind of summing all that up, it's like, in a sense, you were understanding of the persona that you needed to build,
right,
while also being respectful of the language nuance to building this.
Yeah.
And that's there's such nuance in that. There's such depth to how much work you put in to make sure that when people heard this, they understood you were not Latino, but that you weren't trying to like bite off their shit just to be like,
no, I mean, I love the music. And I'm biting off the shit. I am like, it's not, I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm not biting. I am biting. And I fucking truly love like regional Mexican music. It's at this point, it's part of my history. It is at this point. It's like, because I've been into it more than I've been a lot, like more than half or 3/4 of my life.
You have been listening to the Accordion to Me podcast, which is made possible by listeners like you rating and reviewing the podcast. Every time you leave us a review, one of your haters loses their wings and their wallet and maybe their keys. So if you love the podcast, leave us some stars and a quick blurb. And if you hate the podcast, send it to your enemies. Either way, everybody wins. Bye. So we decided to color coordinate our outfits. We decided to change. We decided to be like, okay, we're gonna be in sync now, because this next part.
This is a real interview.
This is a real interview.
Yeah.
We can do costume changes.
Yeah.
We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, this isn't like, we want to give the viewer something to think about and look at, not just like fucking, not just talking.
Exactly.
Yeah, who wants to hear our voices? This is what matters.
This is the fashion.
Yeah.
Fashion.
Yes.
Fashion. Now, the last thing we were talking about was your appreciation of banda and regional music and the gavachillo. And so you're starting that process and you're fully aware as you're getting into it. I want to make sure to pick a name that is correct. And so when was the moment that things shifted with the gavachillo? Because at first, you're just doing the show. You did that show, but then it started to ramp up really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, like opportunities started coming, I think what ended up happening was I was playing around LA and, people were showing up to the shows, and people were like, oh, have you heard this? This dude is doing, because not only was I doing banda, like traditional banda music, I was also like doing, turning like punk songs into banda covers, and doing punk versions of banda, or doing punk covers in banda. And so I was doing that, and that kind of like opened things up too, just kind of like doing something different.
And I even heard some that you haven't released.
Oh, there's so many.
There's I heard so many, and it's just
that haven't released. I don't know.
They're beautiful. Like they're really beautiful arrangements.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
It was clear. It's clear why you got popular, because you had an ear for the punk music. You understand that. You understand it at its core.
Yeah.
But then that appreciation and that growing of ear for banda.
Yeah.
You understand how to blend them enough to where it would make sense.
Well, I love music and I don't shortchange music ever. So that's like number one. Like if I'm gonna do something, I learn it. And I work with the people that know it. And I'm a student again to music. And so I wouldn't say I got big. I think what happened was I had opportunities to get big, but I didn't like fully get like huge in the banda scene or nothing. I don't know if I ever could. I'm not sure. Who knows? But what ended up happening was like the biggest stars in regional Mexican music started taking notice to me. Because up to that point, there were people like talking shit, like, fuck this dude, he sucks, Once Regulo Caro was like the first, like Regulo Caro was really big at the time. And he vouched for me. Like he came out and he said, dude, this dude's fucking dope. He's doing something like
completely different.
And he hit me up on Instagram. And we did a song together, and we did a banda cover of a punk song. This band from the late 70s from England called The Jam, and the song's called In the City. And so, Regulo came over and we translated the song and turned it into Spanish and then made it into like a norteño cumbia called In la Ciudad. And and he loved it. And so we did that song. And then Gerardo Ortiz had me on his show. He was doing like live streams. And so he invited me to come sing. And so when that happened, it just like, cause they have their fans, like Regulo and Gerardo Ortiz, their fans come from like YouTube. They come from, it's like a new generation. They come from like Twitter and Instagram. And so that like really helped, it just gave me like some credibility too, it gave me some credibility to people that, I don't know, whatever. And so when that happened, like I started getting more opportunities. I don't think it was necessarily because of that, but then, and then I was playing I played a show here in like Silver Lake at Los Globos with Hermanos Herrera, who's like a family of musicians from Fillmore who I write music with and stuff. And I was doing a show there. And then this woman, Diana, came, who was the producer of a show on Galavisión, which is a TV network. And she's like, I have an idea. I want you to be the host of like a music show in Mexico. And I was like, God. What the fuck? Like me? Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, really? Like, I mean, I speak Spanish, but not well enough to be a host in some way, Like, I don't know. Hosting is like another level of experience, She's like, no, I think you can do it. And meanwhile, there was a guy in Mexico. So it was like, there was a crew in Mexico and a crew in LA. And they both were talking separately. And there's this guy, Alejandro Franco, who's like a DJ and he's like, he has like a magazine in DF. And they both were talking about me independently to their boss. like
The same boss.
the same boss.
Oh, so they're like different people.
Two different people.
but
Like, yeah, Diana was like, this guy, Gabachillo, you got to check him out. He's like this white dude that does fucking banda. And then that person, I never met this boss, but was like, I don't get it. But then when Alejandro Franco, like literally the next day, who should we get to? And then Alejandro Franco said, we should get this dude Gabachillo. And in Mexico, he said that, like, and then it like both happened. And then that boss was like, who is this guy? You know,
why
who is this
everyone
dude?
talking about
You know,
him?
like, who is this guy? And so they brought me in to like do an audition or whatever. And I was just able to be me. Like, I didn't speak, you know, and they were like, okay, like, they just had me do it like entrevista where I was like asking people questions. And like, I was able to like, I don't know. I like making fun of myself too when I don't know a word or something, and I'll like just say it in Spanglish and move on, and like I don't get stuck, you know. And so I think it just kind of worked, and so I did 2 seasons on that. Yeah. And so for a week every month, like for a week every month for 6 months, I would go to the DF and film this show.
Wow.
And yeah, and it was great. It was a lot of I got a lot of experience. I started getting better at being a host. I learned, you know, a lot about just being a host, and it was cool because we were playing banda music, and so I was able to like interview like banda stars. You know what I mean? It's like it was cool, and I got to meet them, and of course I'm always like pumping my music at that time, and like I met Chuy Lizarga. I don't know if you know who he is.
No, I do not.
He's the guy that sings hey, 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 ¿a dónde está penada? Hey, 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 dime dónde trabaja. You don't remember that song?
I do. Like, I remember the
Me
song.
gusta mucho baile, me subo tubo, les hago table. Soy profesional. Anyways, you don't remember that?
I do. I remember. No, I remember the song. Like, there's been songs. This is what's wild nowadays. Is because everything's gone so digital. I guess like the lost art of radio play is so different now. So when I randomly pop into the radio, and I hear these songs, like I don't get the name of the artist, which like frustrates me. Just as a person, as a listener, I'm like, man, I wish I had like the name of the person. Versus like on streaming, at least if like you're listening to a playlist or you're listening to like a radio, like a, what do they call it? An algorithmic radio.
Right.
You go, oh, what song was that? And you can literally go back and you're like, oh, it's this person. You like it. You remember who that is. But nowadays with radio, it's like hit and miss. And I do remember that song. There was also
it was a super hit.
Yeah, there was also another one that I remember. Like, speaking of just songs that just like stick with you, it's like, Seramos novios, amigos con derechos. You know that one, yeah. But that song, when I heard it, I'm like, what the heck song is this? And I was like, and all I remember, like, amigos con derechos. And that's all I remember, but they would never say the name of the artist.
Right.
Lo and behold.
Who is it?
It is Morenito de Fuego with this other gentleman. But the reason I bring up Morenito is because I didn't realize I was in the same studio as him. Like, we're in the same studio working, like, the same week.
Where?
So like in the over at Produce Studios over with Dusty. So Dusty had him in the morning.
Oh wow.
And he had me in the evening.
Oh, trippy.
So what tripped me out was like Morenito would come by.
Okay.
And so as we're doing the shift, like it's almost like a shift change. Like okay, he got the morning and now we're shift changing to the afternoon. And there was 2 sessions he stayed in for my album while we were working on it. And he's like, and I didn't know who the dude was because there's so many people that are like collab working there at Dusty's, and I'm like, I'm used to just people walking in, listening to something, then walking out. Like that's just the environment. But I was like, okay. And it wasn't until, because he goes, oh, here's my email. If you ever need help with anything, you just hit me up. I'm down. Sick. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Like,
do a song with that fool.
Well, I am going to.
Good.
But I was just tripping out because it literally was until we were in the mix and master of the final like 4 songs.
Yeah.
And I messaged him. I said, hey, dude, can you just like listen to something for me? Like, I just want to make sure it's not just my ear.
Okay.
Because as musicians, I'm sure you can understand, sometimes we're going a slightly deaf.
You think? That's why you got to wear earplugs. Listen to music low volume.
like
It catches up.
yeah, and so I'm like, I'm going slightly deaf. So I was like, hey, I just want to make sure my hearing is okay, and I'm hearing what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And then I don't know what ended up happening, but like somehow Mariano was like, oh yeah, you sent to Morenito, and he played one of his songs, and he played that song, and I'm like, who sings that? And he's like, it's Morenito, dude.
Oh, it's that
And
dude.
I was
Whoa.
tripping balls.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, are you serious, man? I have
Yeah.
literally been bumping his song for like a full year.
Shit.
And he's there in the studio giving me his email, being super chill. Y yo,
Yeah. Wow.
sin saber.
Yeah.
Sin saber. It's
Yeah.
just so interesting, just the environment of music and the fact that you were
Yeah.
a host for a TV show in the F.
It's
like
a
just
trip. Yeah.
what?
It's a trip.
I mean, I know
Yeah.
it depends on if you're comfortable. So I will preface
Yeah.
this right now so
Yeah.
that I can edit it out if we
go
need
ahead.
to.
Yeah.
Because you and I have had conversations about the dark points.
Oh yeah,
in
like
the music.
Oh shit, yeah. No, I had a drug problem. Like yeah, so I
But it's not an easy thing to talk about, and it's
Yeah,
not
oh.
something that's discussed enough.
Yeah.
And I say easy in the sense of you and I are very open with each other.
Yeah.
We're homies.
Yeah.
But out in the world of music,
yeah.
there is a level that you have to be. You have to be
Yeah.
grinding and
So
grinding.
that's the thing. So if you have here's the thing. For me, this is all I can only speak on me. I had poverty in my background. I had drug issues in my background. But even the drug, I was like, I was smoking crack from 13 to 30, really. Yeah. And so, but even the drug wouldn't stop me from making it. It wasn't till I made it. Like I always had this vision of myself because of like, we were homeless when I was a kid. So I always had this vision of myself that was developed from a childhood that eventually I was going to be pushing like a shopping cart down the street, and like living, I don't know, under a tree somewhere. I mean, there was like a vision in my head as a child that eventually I'll be there. But first I'm going to be a rock star. Like that was like always like, I fucking knew I was going to do it. I was going to make it. So what ended up happening was it wasn't till, so even like drugs took a back seat because my desire to make it in music was bigger than even my drug addiction, like at a certain point. So like I was able to like plan my drug use and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like around, like, oh, I got 2 days here. Okay, I'll do drugs then. Like I would plan my drug use around fucking my music career, really.
So the music career just always came first.
Not always. Eventually, I couldn't stop the train of addiction, and eventually, I bought a small house in Silver Lake. I technically made it. Whatever, we won a Grammy. Like after our first Grammy, instead of going to parties and stuff, like I drove to the ATM, and on my way home, I bought. That's the way in my mind, like, oh, you're going to celebrate. But I was like by myself, I mean, we had like these 2 ways at the time. And the band was like, hey, where are you at, man? I'm at this party. Come through. Stevie Wonder's playing and shit. And I'm like at home fucking doing drugs, and yeah, that was like the night of the Grammy, and so that's where it really took a downhill train where it was like, where I started using like all the time. And eventually, and I always told myself, as long as I'm not affecting other people, I don't need to tell anybody. But then when I started missing interviews, I started like not showing up to like just little, even stuff that didn't mean a lot, it hurt. It affected me a lot because then I was going against my own morals. Like now I'm affecting other people. And at that time, I didn't have children, but there's other people in my band that did have children. And so like now I'm affecting the other generation. That's how I looked at it. I'm affecting, my band members' children too, by me missing things, by me like putting a bad name to Ozomatli. So eventually I remember what it was. It was, my dad had died. My dad died when I was like 28 years old. And it was like a year later. I think he died. No, sorry. He died when I was 26. And this was like, I was 29. Anyways, the point is his birthday was October 12th. And we were opening up for Santana at the Hollywood Bowl. October 12th. This is 2002, October 12th, 2002. And I promised myself that I wasn't going to use drugs that night because I'm opening up for fucking Santana at the Hollywood Bowl and it's my dad's birthday. And in the memory of my dad, I'm not going to fucking do that. And I couldn't stop it. I played, we were like one of the last, we had a song with Santana called One of These Days on his record. And I remember like waiting for that because I had to play with him that night. And I'm like, fuck, I'm waiting for the fucking song to come, because I got to get out of here, And like here I'm playing with Dennis Chambers, like one of the greatest drummers ever. And like a dream come true. And I'm playing at the Hollywood Bowl. And all I could think about is fucking going to buy drugs, Yeah. And so I waited to play and I was out. As soon as I played with Santana, I was fucking in my car and like straight out of there. Yeah. And that's where it was like the worst, where I couldn't even make it through a night. And that's when I called my band. I said, hey, everybody come over. I think it was the next day or the next couple of days. I said, please come over. And they all came over. And I told them, I have a drug issue. I have a drug problem. They all knew I smoked weed. I smoked weed fucking hourly, but they didn't know about
the stronger stuff.
The cocaine and stuff. And I told them. And then my manager came over, Amy, and and luckily I had, luckily Amy, she went to work and she found Music Cares through the Grammys. And the Music Cares had such, they have so much experience dealing with drug addicts. They said to Amy, make a deal with him. Give him like 3 months to stop on his own. And if he can't stop on his own, he agrees to go to treatment.
So that was them telling her what the plan is.
And so she came back to me and she said, okay, will you agree to go to rehab if you can't do it on your own? And I said, yeah. And she's like, oh, how's 3 months? I said, perfect. I got this. Right. Like it was October, November, December 18th, I got arrested. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got arrested. And I got arrested. And the writing was on the table because 2 days later I was supposed to go to Australia. We were touring with the Black Eyed Peas. It was us and the Black Eyed Peas. This was before even Black Eyed Peas had like major hits. And I think this might have been Fergie's first tour with them. And I remember going, and we were touring with them. And I remember like just getting through that tour, like smoking weed and like looking for other things, but never being able to find it,
But you come back.
But I was telling everybody like I'm going to rehab as soon as the judge said you can go work as soon as you get off the plane, you go to rehab.
Okay.
So the judge let me go, and said I could go to work. And so because it was my first offense. And that's what I did. And that was 20 years ago, January. So it'll be 21 years in January next year. Yeah. And I have not used drugs or alcohol.
And so,
since then. But I was.
And it's just crazy that Music Cares already like they deal with it. They deal with this and so many other things. I know that they're just such it's one of those unspoken assets of the Recording Academy is Music Cares in that program. And
it's amazing.
It just makes me so happy you're still here.
Me too. Yeah, me too. And I owe them a lot. And then because of this, I get to help people too, now it's like, when they want it, we all got to want it, too. We all got to want it or be willing to like try something different. And I think that's what it was. I was willing to like at least go explore. I was never going to stop smoking weed. I fucking love weed so much. To this day, I love the smell. I love the feeling. I love, eating it, butter, fucking all that shit. I mean, now it's like a field day. I mean, your generation has so much fun with weed. Like we didn't get all that shit. Like the most we got
illegal.
was brownies, like that was like the highest. Or sometimes we would get like Rice Krispie treats or something with weed in it. That was like the highest level. But now there's like lollipops and shit. I didn't get to experience that, but I realize I don't need weed, even though I still love it. I'm not against weed. Like it's just not, it's not what I should be doing. You know what I'm saying? That's all.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Yep.
And so, all of these things happen. Your life takes a change and your life is so full.
Yeah, it is.
And so for you, for anyone that's just in music, producing, trying to kind of make their own sound,
Yeah.
what's some advice you would give them? Because right now it's definitely a time of sound making. Like we're seeing so many new genres or new blends of a genre come together. And so, given the fact that you were so successful with Ozomatli, you know, what would be something that you would tell people?
I mean, listen to music, and try to you know, if you're gonna do something, try to do something that's hasn't been done. You know, I think that there's like a lot of people get caught up like right now all the kids are doing like Sierreño music, and it's like all sounding the same, you know, like in regional, you know what I mean? It's like, which is great. It's great, but there's the next thing is going to be, and you can create that, you know, you can, you know, take chances and work with each other. I would say learn as much as you can, and learn as much as you can about any music you like, you know, like it doesn't have to be the genre that you do either, you know. I would say like it will help you to like be into other shit. It'll expand if you're like I'm listening to like Bach, you know, Serenata 1, you know, in G minor or whatever last night on my walk, you know, and it's like that's going to help me like with whatever I'm going to do, you know, like even though I'm not doing
Classical music.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, because for me, it's just music. Music overall is music, food, and just art are things that are a sign of the times.
Yeah.
They are no one that's done any of those things.
right.
If they're famous or they have you know an impact,
Right.
it's not because they played it safe.
Yeah.
It's not because they went, oh, let me make the same thing that everyone else is making.
Yeah.
You know, it's a staple now because of course we all hear it.
Yeah.
But it's not meant to be like, oh, let me just stay safe in the box of art and just be chill right here. That's not how it becomes something more. Not how it affects people.
Yeah, and to not just do music for business either. You know, it's also music has a history with us as human beings, and you know, it's like you can't like it, you know, just don't separate yourself from people, from human beings, because you know, like when you're playing the guitar, you're playing an African instrument, really, like at the core of it, you know, and so like let's not forget the ancestors who like went through so much shit to like get the guitar to where it is now, that what I'm playing. Does that make sense? Like and so like
there's ancestral history to the instruments that we play and to the things that we do.
And it may not be what you think your ancestry is. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It may not be, because like the rules and the lines that we're creating now are like they're real in terms of power in our society, but it's not necessarily real.
You with Ozomatli and you personally have worked on so many projects and done so much work in music. And so was there any point that you felt that personally that things were coming to a head?
You mean in
the environment of music? So
like,
the music
like
environment.
In which direction you mean ahead? Like
so like in the environment of music, there's like you have to keep up a certain pace.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. I think it's just. I mean, I've slowly backed off from trying to like do so much, you know, because yeah. Well, it comes from like poverty, right? So like I grew up in poverty, so there's this idea that I need to be doing more and doing something all the time to not ever go back to poverty. So I'm like running away from poverty. It wasn't until recently where I'm just like, oh no, I'm okay doing less. Like I'm not, and my value in life as a human being isn't tied to music anymore. Does that make sense? Like, I love doing music and I love working on things, but like the value of me as a human, as a person, and not only that, how do I want to spend my time? Like now, like I go on walks every day and I look at trees just by myself, and I'm like, and that's fulfilling too. You know what I mean? So like, I think it's like, but when you're young, you got to do it. You got to. So I don't want to give mixed messages now because you know what I mean?
No,
because
I
of
get
where
what you're
I'm at
saying.
in my life, right?
Mhm.
So the point is when you're young, you got to go for it. And it has to be music. Look, you can get really lucky. I've seen some people get lucky and they have like hits and a lot of money, but if you don't know how to manage your money, you get to 30 and you're broke. I've seen that shit like 1,000 times, like so many times. So, but you can always come back, but it'll never be what it was. You're only going to be like young once, you know? So you're only going to be young once. You're only going to be under 30 once. You're only going to be under 40 once. And so I think, like for me, when I was coming up, my band, Ozomatli, meant more than anything else in my life. Anything. There wasn't a human being in this world, including the band members, that would come, that would get in the way of me. In my mind, this is all in my mind, which is partly true and partly not, is like making the band make it. I had that much writing on it. That, you know what I mean? Like I was going to make it in music. I didn't know how, I didn't know where or what, but I was going to make it and nothing was going to stop me. And that is the, to me, that's the only way I know how to do it. So when I would like, if I would give some kind of dumb advice or anything, it's like, that's the only way I know how to even describe to people what you should do.
So I know we usually ask this to our guests at the end of the episode. So what is life accordion to you?
Life is just is to give it my all. Give it my all and don't give up. That's it. Give it my all and don't give up.
Well, thank you very much for watching another episode of the Accordion to Me podcast. And as always, puro amor, puro besos, puro Ozomatli.
Ya sabes.
Thank you for listening to Accordion to Me. The team behind this week's episode includes mixing and editing by Juan Pablo Diaz, theme music by Rodrigo Montalvo, produced by Javi G from MD Media. In-person recordings were done at the Spotify studios and remotely through Riverside FM. Accordion to Me is distributed through Anchor, and you can stream Accordion to Me wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. I'm your host and executive producer, Veronique Medrano. Puro amor, puro besos, puro Tex-Mex.